Hey, on this episode of Gen X Amplified, I have the pleasure of being joined by Chauncey Zalkin, who is a writer, creative entrepreneur, storyteller, podcaster, and just a phenomenal Gen Xer. And we're going to talk all about her passion for culture, storytelling, and what it means to be a Gen X woman in midlife in today's world. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
Yeah, I think it's like this ongoing journey, and the bad things that happen to you help define who you are by how you react to them and what is left after the fallout of things that are tough.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified. This is the show dedicated to amplifying and giving a voice to the very powerful and exceptional generation between those brilliant boomers and magnificent millennials. And again, I am beyond thrilled to introduce yet another amazing guest, someone whose story, creativity, and entrepreneurial journey perfectly embody the spirit of transformation that we love to celebrate here on the podcast. And as a former marketing exec and brand strategist and passionate Gen Xer, I also feel she may be a kindred spirit, but that's why I'm excited for this conversation. So my featured guest is first and foremost a writer, true storyteller, and creative powerhouse. She's also a former VP and SVP of marketing for tech startups, where she established brand architecture that drove growth. Her stories and insights have been featured in multiple publications, including Teen People, Trace Magazine, New York Post, Daily News, and others. And now she is back to her roots, leaning into her true love of content and storytelling through her Substack and her podcast titled Actual People. I just love that title, by the way, where she has amazing conversations with guests discussing important topics such as navigating this middle stage of our careers, the creative industries, AI, menopause, beauty standards, identity, and more. So without further ado, please welcome someone whose life journey is as vibrant and inspiring as her creative mind, the one, the only, Chauncey Zalkin. Chauncey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I am, first of all, I'm always, whenever I come across fascinating people, creatives, inspiring minds, I'm always giddy and excited. And I mentioned in the intro, you have some brand strategy background, or you currently do. And I like to tell people I'm a recovering marketing executive. So yes. I'm always excited to meet other people that come from the marketing and branding trade, but especially excited to meet someone who is a passionate Gen Xer. So we're going to have some fun today.
Yes. Go Gen X.
Love it. Go Gen X.
Yes.
All right. So first, Chauncey, what I would love to do, if you don't mind, because we have a lot to talk about, because you are a multi-hyphenate. You do so many great, amazing things that are inspiring. But first, let's take a trip back. Let's talk about, if you don't mind walking me and our audience through just your professional journey that really led to the tapestry of meaningful impact that you are creating in the world right now. Just how did you get started first in the marketing trade, and then what made you just really dove into your passion for creativity, if you don't mind?
Well, I would say it was the other way around. I don't have a marketing degree. I went to very liberal artsy schools. I went to Bennington College, which only had 600 students. It was too artsy for me. I thought of myself as being an artsy kid. I transferred to the New School for social research, and I got a degree in cultural studies. And my first interest was in fashion, but more from an intellectual standpoint and aesthetic standpoint, as opposed to becoming a designer. And I wrote like a thesis on Vogue magazine when I was a kid, and I got an A on the paper, and my, very intellectual supervisor was like, I don't think fashion has that kind of influence on culture, prove me wrong. So I was very proud of that. And it was about the formation of American female identity. And then I went on to, it was like the .com years, the early .com years. And I worked at 17 Magazine and Harper's Bazaar just as an editorial assistant. And I didn't feel like I was getting any love there. I didn't feel like, I was like moving up fast enough. I ended up going to a .com in New York. This is all in New York. I wrote a newsletter for this website that was basically promoting nightlife. And I kind of made it my own and wrote about street style and culture. And then all these like mergers and acquisitions going on in media and entertainment. I would kind of connect the dots on like what that meant culturally and in business. Okay. And then I spun off and I started something called Girl on the Street. Mainly because people thought I was a guy with my name being Chauncey. So I had to think of something to like, because people would be surprised when they would meet me because this was writing, of course, not a podcast, not video. And they're like, oh my God, you're female.
Now, I'm just quick question. Let me jump in. So when they said that, was it like, oh, you're a female? Or like, I'm just curious, what was the vibe you were receiving?
They were just surprised. It was not I don't think it was disappointment, but it was like, they were bemused. They're like, oh, because Chauncey sounds like a guy's name. And I was like, okay, that's it. Because they were called Chauncey's Updates. Like, think like pre-blogging. Okay, there was no blogging.
Yeah, around what year was this? Was this in like late 90s or early 2000s?
And I would go to like hip hop clubs and like album release parties, and I would take pictures with like this huge ass digital camera.
Well, and I remember.
Like a really big one. I'd go to fashion shows and be
is this in New York? Is this in New York?
Is this in New York? Yes.
So I moved to New York in '99, right after graduate school. I'm born and raised in the South, but I moved to New York. I lived there for 10 years. And so that was the year I graduated from Vanderbilt, and I moved to New York, lived in Brooklyn.
Vandy, my dad would call it.
I worked in the city. But yeah, and so I remember my first year in New York was '99. So I had the old school digital camera. I used to walk the streets of Times Square and go to the Village. And so, yeah, we have a lot to talk about. I'm just curious to hear.
Interesting, because I live in Raleigh, North Carolina now.
See, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia, but I still have the 917. I still have the 917 number.
Me too.
I'm not giving it up.
Yeah, I still have. Yeah, I'm like, it's not 919, it's 917.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And moving to new places too, and how that your identity changes and doesn't change over the time. Right. But anyway, I just you get the sense. I had this website. It was nominated for a Webby. Like it was such an old school thing that I don't. For years I didn't mention it a lot because it made me sound like really dated, but I did that. And then I had something called What Women Make. And I lived in Europe, and I chronicled like more industrial design and illustration. And I had an exhibit at the London Design Festival. Mm-hmm. So I lived in Europe for 5 years, and then I'm skipping some stuff, but you don't need to know every single detail. I don't want to bore anybody. Then I moved back to New York, and I had twins, and I was married. I'm divorced, and I'm a single mom of twins, and they are 10 years old.
Okay. Twin girls,
twin
boys.
Girls.
Okay, twin girls. Names?
Yeah. Bay and Sky. Okay. Bay like the water, Sky like the air.
Very
I just
pretty.
came from their school because one of them forgot their lunchbox. They're in 5th grade. So I've been there. I got to eat lunch with them. I knew this was coming up today, but I still ate lunch with them because I realized they're not going to want me to eat lunch with them in a year. So in middle school, it's not going to be cool anymore, which is terrifying to me. But yes.
Now you're breaking my heart because, I can empathize, and then so I have a 10th grader son, and I have a 4th grader daughter who's my princess. So she's 4th grade. And so I guess I have a couple years because I told her yesterday I'm going to eat lunch with her because I haven't done it in a while. She was all excited. So I guess that excitement will stay there maybe another year.
They were so thrilled. And they're not allowed to have me there next year in middle school.
Right.
But I don't know. They're still little kids to me. They're still, I see some changes, but they're still little kids, but I know it's coming, and I don't like it. You probably know more about it because you have a 10th grader.
Get ready for the teen years. That's all I can say.
But yeah, so that, and then I had a company with my ex-husband. He's a DP and editor, and we had a little agency. I say little agency, but we had big clients. We had Comcast, Beyond Meat, Timex, PNC Bank, Edible Schoolyard. We had a bunch of nonprofits, and it was like little mini documentary stories about like the process or the mission of a company. And I loved doing that. And we got divorced. So I moved to the South because my mother lived in South Carolina. And then I could not do South Carolina. So I was there for a couple of years when my kids were really tiny. And then I moved to Raleigh right before the pandemic as an experiment. And here I still am. And I really love Raleigh. I think I would probably prefer to live in Atlanta, actually. But I think I'm done with New York. Atlanta has a lot of traffic, but it has more going on. I'm getting a little bored.
I hate to say, I mean, I've been in Atlanta. So now we moved from New York in 2009. So my son was born November 2008, and that's why we moved. So it was our firstborn child. We've been there for 10 years. So we wanted a lifestyle change. It's fine. I miss New York, honestly. I miss it a lot. I don't know if I would go back, maybe as a second home. But Atlanta's cool. It's just the traffic. You hit it right on the head. It's horrible.
Like a sea of cars. That's like the main focal point is like I went back to agency life when I was in South Carolina. There was this one agency. It was very strange. That was like in Hilton Head, and they had national accounts. It was anyway. I don't want to get into that agency, but. And so I went back to brand strategy and digital strategy for a while, and Church's Chicken was my client.
Oh, wow.
So I spent a lot of time in Atlanta.
Yes.
For that client.
Right.
And
because they're headquarters.
I started to get, like a little bit fond of Atlanta. I went to some concerts there and did some nightlife stuff because a lot of the people that worked at this agency were from Atlanta because they had an Atlanta office too. Okay. So I was like, Atlanta's better than I thought. I didn't really have much need for it before, but yeah, I think it seems kind of cool.
It's cool. I love bodies of water. So that's the only downside. It doesn't have like from Memphis, Tennessee, we have the Mississippi River. Even in Nashville, New York, obviously you have the Hudson in the east, and here there's just land. And
I grew up in Miami.
Oh, see,
on the water. Yeah, but I like mountains, and mostly I like culture and access to mountains.
Wow. Now you mentioned earlier, so I want to go back quickly because I always love hearing inflection points and journeys in our stories, especially Gen Xers. So you mentioned that you moved abroad at one point.
Yes.
You said?
Okay. Yes.
This
is my favorite thing about me, I guess. I mean, this is like
Let's unpack it. Let's talk about
life highlight. So I was a member of the Chief Network for a couple years.
Yes.
And we have these like cohort groups that you meet with. And I was in a couple of them because I kept switching them. But you had to do this thing where you had to go up and down through your life, like chart the ups and downs. And so one of the highlights of my life was, other than my kids being born, was I got laid off from a job at an agency in New York. And I was very distraught about this because I didn't like the job particularly. I like the people I work with a lot, but I was like, I don't even want to be in advertising, and I sold my apartment in Brooklyn, and I had a little bit of money, and I had always wanted to live in Paris. Like that was why I even moved to New York. And so I didn't tell anybody. I figured out like a place to stay. There was no Airbnb yet. I found somebody through somebody, and I found a short-term place to stay. I bought my ticket. I sold all my stuff except for, what I really needed. I organized everything and then announced it to my friends and family that I was moving to Paris so that no one could try to talk me out of it. And on January 15th, 2007, I moved to Paris with my little dog.
Oh, so this before your twins.
And then I lived there for 2 years, and then I moved to Barcelona for 3 years after that.
Okay.
And then moved back to New York, which I had not planned on moving back to New York, but my ex-husband, who's English, wanted to live in New York, and a job that I was thinking I was going to get in London fell through. And I didn't have any other connections in London, and neither did he really. And I had way more connections in New York for us to start our business because we had already kind of started it in Barcelona, telling stories about local companies and arts organizations in Barcelona for very little money. And so we moved to New York, and we actually did pretty well because we got some Vimeo staff picks, and then a big design agency, Frog Design, liked our work and introduced us to the people at Comcast after they developed their website. And then so that was our bread and butter. And then we just got these great clients, and we would do some passion projects, and we were doing we did really well.
That's great.
But then I had to go back to advertising, had these little tiny babies, and I lived in Beaufort, South Carolina for 3 or 4 years, which was a tough time, but It's a very pretty place. And it was a nice little break. And I was obviously very busy with babies. But so my life is kind of normalized now. They're ambulatory and verbal, and I don't need to like take care of them every second of the day. But so, I have a lot of inflection points.
That inflection point. You mentioned that you made the decision, you just got your ticket and you made the move before your family and your friends could talk you out of it.
Yeah.
But it seems like there wasn't an opportunity for yourself to talk yourself out of it. Like you were determined. Like what created that determination, and why were you just dead set on, I'm going to do this? But sounds like you were possibly vulnerable to some people that you really admired and loved to possibly talk you out of it. So I'm just take me in the mind of Chauncey at that time, because I think that's a very interesting path of decision making that you embarked on.
I think it's really well, I had wanted to do it for so long, but I didn't have the money. I never understood. I always admired people who like I figured this out with no money to go live in Europe. But I had always wanted to live there. So early, like when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a fashion designer, and the kind of fashion designer I imagined myself to be before I really knew that you had to have interest in the actual doing of something. I was never really interested in like sewing. I'm a writer, but I had this fantasy that I would be a fashion designer, and I was interested in like Coco Chanel. I was interested in Gautier. I was interested in French, like the French sort of mindset towards aesthetic culture. So for me, it was like making a run for it. I did not want to be in advertising, and I really wanted to write a book. And so there's some there's some like unmet desires still in existence, which is that I wrote a book and it has never been published while I was there. That's what I did. So I took a year sabbatical where I did not work I wrote every day, all day, had a writer's group. That's how I met my ex-husband. And I wrote a novel, and I have like pieces of 2 different novels. Nothing has been published.
Okay.
And I write a lot, but I write a lot publicly nonfiction, but privately I write fiction.
So, because you mentioned, I know you write based on what I've observed, a lot of nonfiction, a lot of insights, thought leadership, but you mentioned novels. So I'm like, okay, fiction. So
nobody read my fiction.
No, well, let's talk about that. That's why we're on this podcast. Never been published. Give me the why, and let me know, first of all, is that still a dream or a goal of yours?
It's my ultimate dream and goal.
Ultimate.
Like
so
it's like truly all I care about.
So
other than my children, again, other than my
okay. Did you pursue traditional like agent? Like what's your?
Yes, I did. I did do that for a couple years, and I didn't get an agent. I almost got a deal at a major publishing house, and then it didn't work out because there was something in the narrative that they said we just can't figure out. There's 2 different narratives in this story, and one of them is a mystery, and it's just too confusing because I'm not letting people know what's actually happening. And so it could have been just a straight like memoir type of story, but it wasn't. And so they said, we just really love your writing style and the way you write, but we just couldn't figure it out. And we had a couple meetings about it. So we need you to come back to us with your next, or if you figure out how to solve that problem, which I never did. And, became a mom and had to raise my kids, and I have to work. And so I've taken lots of workshops, and I continue to write. And again, like I said, I started several other stories, and you can hear the first chapter of another book called Claw on my podcast. I read the first chapter, and I recorded the second chapter, but I haven't released it yet. So I was going to weave that into my podcast, because they're also kind of like metaphors, allegories about culture, the stories.
Okay. Yeah, we got to figure out a way for you to claw back into this goal of yours. No pun intended. Sorry. So let's talk about the writing.
If you have any literary agent friends, send them my way.
Hey, I'm actually on that pathway. On more on the nonfiction, so I'm working on finishing my book proposal now. So I haven't pursued an agent yet, because I'm getting the sample chapters ready and all that. But yeah, so
it's a very different road for nonfiction.
Because not for fiction, you bring the entire manuscript. I'm assuming.
I wrote like 3 or 4 drafts of that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, of the first one, and but yeah, I don't really like. I think it's funny because my world is really nonfiction.
Yes.
I was a columnist for Inc. magazine. I've written a lot about business stuff. I've written a lot about culture. but this year is about trying to start pitching, more the personal essay, and I'm trying to move a little bit away from business.
Okay.
I mean, that's something you might have. I'm not saying you're not in business, but that might be something we have in common. I really am ready to leave marketing behind.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about some of those decisions that you've made. So you mentioned, and I read your bio, and I can just tell by chatting with you, Chauncey, that you're a writer, passionate writer. You love the written word. You love creativity. Let's talk about, you decided to launch a podcast, Actual People. Take us through that decision. What made you want to put yourself behind the microphone and have conversations, and also just to divulge your own passions and experiences and stories behind the mic? Okay.
You know what? I think that it's similar to the decision to move to Paris. I don't know if there's times in your life where everything seems to this is kind of almost the story or the theme of the book that I wrote. It's like everything just falls into place, and it's like, okay, you're on the right path, and there's like a rhythm to it. And other things are so hard. That doesn't mean they're wrong, but it's like just a lot of like uphill battle, a lot of efforting. My therapist told me this term, efforting, and I love it. She's like, sometimes you're just efforting. So some things I've just efforted along at. And I think my advertising career has been a lot of efforting, but similar to my moving to Paris, and just making it all happen for myself. The podcast, I've been on a few, other people's podcasts, and I went into a podcast studio, which is rare these days, but I went and was interviewed, and I was like, oh my God, I love this so much. And I'm not one to it's hard for me to be in the center of attention, kind of. I'm always like a little bit left of center. But somehow I still loved being in a podcast and talking about these things. So that was the first thing. And then I had a podcast with another woman here in Raleigh called Why Raleigh. And we only had a handful of episodes. Okay. And our dynamic didn't quite work for me, but I felt like I was onto something, and I got a lot of positive feedback from other people who said, you should have your own podcast. Like, you're really good at this. Good. That's good. Which I liked hearing. And then I just went full. I was like, I'm absolutely launching a podcast. And I dedicated 3 months to learning everything I could about podcasting and about what I wanted to talk about. And then I met this woman who helped launch a major podcast and media channel. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention her name. And someone put me in touch with her, and she said, you shouldn't do just straight interviews. I've looked at the stuff that you've done. I think you should tell your own story. So that changed everything and made it much easier for me. So that's why I do monologues, which are basically verbal essays, and takes a lot of craft to get to where they are. And then I also do these interviews with people because my curiosity is about kind of what you're doing. Like, what on earth is happening to our generation? Like, who are we now? There's a lot of reckoning going on with like Diddy and just a lot of people falling from grace, but also being ignored that have done great things. We kind of we don't get credit where credit is due. And we also, I think what's going on with Diddy is putting a stain on the great stuff hip hop did to our culture, and it shouldn't. He's him and whatever. That's terrible. But I hope that doesn't stain the history of hip hop, which I think, in my personal opinion, does not exist anymore the way it did. But but that hip hop's not the only thing. We've done a lot of things in art and culture that are, they don't get their due. So I like looking at that stuff and figuring out, like, at this stage of life, who are we? That interests me. So that's what the guests are for. Especially like people like me who've had a whole career doing something that wasn't necessarily purely, their creative, instinct, because they have to make money. And, before you die, you want to self-actualize. And so what do you really want? It's a scary question, but that's kind of that journey I'm on. It's like, what do I really want? How to do it, how to afford it, and so on.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chauncey, for walking me through. Obviously, as a fellow podcaster, I'm always interested in what makes individuals tend to gravitate toward different media, especially as a writer. And were you a fan? Did you listen to podcasts previously?
Oh, yeah.
Before you, okay. Did you? Yeah. Same here.
Okay. So I drove when I lived in South Carolina, I had to drive 45 minutes each way to work at this agency through all this like marshland. I mean, you probably know. And it was a, you know, foreign place. I had just lived in Europe and New York. I'd never lived in the South like this, you know, the real deep South. And it was a weird time. And I like podcasts were like my friends. It was how I, like I was, because also like a link to New York. But I did the true crime thing. And then I listened to all the like dot guru type people, you know, and I listened to the Daily and all the news stuff. I'm still these days. I don't listen. They don't show as many podcasts as they used to, and I'm not interested in true crime. So I listen to like the Daily and news. I'm like interested. I'm like anxious about the election. So that's kind of what I listen to now. But I think that we, you know, that all those people got laid off, and I think that's sad because I think podcasts, the algorithm's not showing you enough stuff. I don't just want to hear it from famous people, you know? Right.
No, I agree. And I think, you know, during, which was a crazy time in 2020, the pandemic, it did allow the floodgates to open more for us to hear more conversations, everyday people, actual people, a lot of the title. Then you had Clubhouse at the time, which was came and gone. But I've always loved podcasts, and I'm grateful to the person who advised that you expand your format and beyond just interviews, because I think interviews are great. I do interviews too, but for you to focus on your monologues and telling your story, because I think there's so much benefit to that. And we're on Gen X Amplified, and one of the episodes that you published, which was
my first episode,
the Suddenly 50. Where we are and what's next is Gen X. Can you, if you don't mind, which I thought was a very compelling episode, number one, because of the title, and obviously I'm a passionate Gen Xer, and my goal, in addition to helping people get unstuck, especially in the middle, especially Gen Xers, is to amplify the virtues and the gems of our exceptional generation, and not just something that's negative and overlooked. It's interesting because I actually caught another one of your conversations about Elon Musk and the X and the brand, because I'm a brand person. And it's funny, like my passion for Gen X, and I've told the story before, that it dates back when I was in my mid-20s. I used to speak a lot in my church, and I did this. I was 24 at the time, or 25, and I did this whole talk about us. And this was in 1996 or 97. Us as Gen Xers, you know, they call us the X generation, the unknown. X means X marks the spot. If you're illiterate, you sign your name with an X, but it's time for us to change that Generation X title from negative to positive, like Generation Exuberant, Generation Exemplified, Generation Extravagant. I did this at 25 years old. Now, I never knew in 1997, years later, I would have a podcast called Gen X Amplified. But I always like to say this when I do speaking and consulting, that the dots always connect. If you are in this mid stage of your life and you're trying to figure out and self-actualize, go back and look at where those dots can connect to your purpose and meaning now. And that's something that I've done. So, but anyway, I'm kind of rambling.
Oh, wait. Can I just say something?
Yes.
So I did look at this. So I had that thing called Girl on the Street. It was like a street style blog and cultural commentary. Then I had something called What Women Make. So I was always about like chasing this, you know, the overused word, but authenticity. Like I just wanted to see what real people did that were really, didn't have like a huge PR team, but were just like, I was just in my kids' school and I love watching the kids because they're just totally themselves. That is what I like. Like I think I like people when they're themselves, whatever they are. If I can see that that's really who they are, that I'm drawn to that. And then I had Girl on the Street, What Women Make, and then I had actual people. And I say, okay, I just dropped the female focus. You know, overtly, there's a lot of women on I've only had one guy, but that's not on purpose. I would like to have more men. But yeah, so it's just like actual, like, because of AI and everything else. Yes. So yeah, there is definitely a thread and so I'm kind of challenging myself to be really honest. I am in person. People say that about me, but to tell these stories that are just really true. On my podcast. No,
I'm so glad you did that. And that particular episode, if you don't mind, can you just talk about the Suddenly 50 episode, the why? And you were very candid, insightful. It really, to me, pulled back the drapes for people who did not know you or who wanted to get to know you. And you talked a lot about many dynamics and things that many of us go through, but we really don't talk about enough. Just talk about that episode.
Well, you know what? It's been a while, so you're going to have to refresh my memory.
Oh.
I'm like, you know.
Well, you talked, well, I'll just, at a high level, you talked a lot about, again, from a macro standpoint, Gen Xers and what we are at this stage of our life. When you recorded or published episode, you said you had turned 50 the year before. Mm-hmm. And many of your friends were at this stage, and you talked about some of the health challenges that you have gone through.
Yes.
You talked about your divorce. I mean, I don't want to say too much, but it was, because you were very candid. So it is out there. So you talked about,
my episodes are a little like, they're not, I think they're full of hope, but I think there's some sadness in some of my episodes.
But that's you.
I just feel like I talk about grief. My dad died, and but it's all true.
You shared it, but again, look, this is one of the reasons why I do what I do, and I think that, and again, this is literally my mission. I have been the marketer, and I still am passionate about branding, but my mission now is to help, I guess, eliminate the malaise of the middle, right? And to help transform that into mastery. Yes, we are in this phase of our lives where it doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, you have a lot of the focus on the younger generations, which rightly so.
Right. But if you don't see yourself represented in culture,
exactly,
it's kind of like I've lost all those markers, except for my friends, but we're all dispersed. We don't live near each other. My close friends. I have my mom friends here. And there's one that's older I'm an older mom. I'm 51 and I have young kids. So that also makes me unique in a way. And I'm a single mom, which people don't talk about that much either. But I think it's like this loss of identity, or also aging. I have a lot of episodes about just suddenly you look different. You show up in the world a little bit differently to other people, and you try to figure out like what that means. You don't want to retire or decline. You need to kind of find a way to see yourself in a different way, and that's the
but that's what's driving, whether it's this show, whether it's my mid-career mastery, I call it not just a company but a movement, is to remind all of us, number one, we're now in the year of the extended lifespans, right, where people are living up to 100 or maybe past 100. And so if you're 45, if you're 50, 53 like myself, which right when I said that, I'm like, okay, God, I'm 53.
So you have to be honest about, because there's nothing wrong. This means that you're alive. And
exactly. But this is still halftime.
Strange. And it's a weird stigma, isn't it though?
It's very weird. And so I'm proud to say that, but we're still, if you think about it, if we're living to 100, we still have 30, 40 years ahead of us to create an impact. And so there's magic. What I always say, there's magic in the middle. And I want to use that as a reminder for all of us. Use our experience, use our wisdom, use the challenges that we have overcome in the past, and use that as gems to move forward. And so, just that episode, some of the things you talked about, again, health issues, personal issues. You talked about the love of your twins. When you shared that and published the episode, it sounds like you were hearing a lot of similar things from your friends or people you were witnessing, but you felt the need to, again, awaken the clarion call to say, hey, we're suddenly 50. What does that mean for us? Just talk about that episode and talk about some of your feelings about Gen Xers.
Anew now.
Yes.
Really, I can talk about it in a fresh way because that was a year ago.
Yes.
I'm like, how old am I? I'm 51. I'm like, I think I called myself 52. I'm 51. Am I 51? Yeah, I'm 51. I'm like, oh my God. I was born in 73. Yes. I just noticed, I think people gloss over or try to dress up the situation that I found a year ago. A lot of people were getting laid off. I was in the chief network. So it's like everyone seemed to have been laid off. And then you notice everyone in media and entertainment getting laid off, and advertising, and the movement going away from brand and story. So all the creatives were are still in crisis because it's all about performance marketing. And of course, I do have a marketing and brand lens because that's been my career. Mostly brand until the last 6-7 years where I became a marketing leader. And that was very volatile. Those companies I went in and out of because they can't, it's not the roles are not long lived. So there's a lot of vulnerability that happens. And I notice amongst my peers, unless you're independently wealthy, we don't have the kind of spending power that we had or are used to. And it does affect, I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, it affects your sense of self. And we live in a capitalist society, so we feel uncomfortable that we're still having to strive and try things when we're supposed to be at a point in our career where we're kind of coasting. That's what our parents did in their, not everybody, but that's what you would see with people in their 50s, 40s and 50s. They were at the top of their career. I felt like I was really at the top of my career, but going to go further in my 40s, in my early 40s. And it stalled out or took different turns, and that's fine. I just expected that to be the realm of my 20s and not to have to do that. But that might just be just a expectation thing. But I think everybody, I just want to be honest. Like, look, I think everyone is struggling. They are, and they're not really admitting it. I mean, because I have individual conversations with people every day, and they are struggling. I would say more so maybe a year ago. Maybe things are looking up, like this is an election year, and of course it's going to be a little bit slower. But I noticed a lot of people back into the marketplace, a lot of people who were very high up in organizations not being out of work suddenly, after I've always moved around. So I'm very entrepreneurial. I've had my own business. So for me, it's not that big a deal, except financially, but it's not like my whole self is attached to one major media company or something like that. Like my sister's been a producer for ABC her entire career. Oh, so, wow. That would be a huge change if she lost her job. She never had.
Well, that's rare. Is that rare for production?
She was a producer at Good Morning America, and now she works for ABC News, and I think a little bit Good Morning America.
Okay.
Since she was, I'm not 100% sure the year, but I say around 25 years old, and she's 3 years older than me. Okay. She's always been with ABC. So for her, she's still there. But for people lost jobs like that, a lot of people. So for them, it's probably like more of a shock to their identity, or people just are sick of corporate life. I don't love corporate life. I'm not a big, I don't like people telling me what to do. I like being a consultant. I have a great client right now, and I'm hoping I can continue along this path of just being a consultant, because I don't like to have a job. And I feel like at this age, I think everyone should have their own company or their own entity.
You're being very self-aware. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. No. I can empathize.
Know. It also feels like somebody's has your fate in their hands when you have a job. Like
they do. Well, doesn't feel like they do have your fate.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I don't like that. I don't enjoy that. It's scary, So I just think it's a scary time. I don't know if this is what you wanted the answer to be, but yes, like I had really good times, and then I had these kids, and they're, thank God, knock on wood, they're healthy and they're beautiful and they're smart and they're doing well in school, and but I found out I was BRCA positive, and that means that I had to get a double mastectomy, and I had a complete hysterectomy while I'm taking care of these little kids, and right after a divorce, and living in a place I didn't want to live after, living in these international great cities and having my own business. And it was just like a big fall from grace for me at the time. And so you just have to, as you get humbled by stuff, you have to think about what your essence is and what you really care about. And you have to do away with these things that look good on paper, make you seem like you belong in some sort of club, but you aren't authentic to you. And even though I'm, very honest and sincere, I still had those trappings. Like I wanted nice, I still love nice things, but I do care about what people think of me. I did want to keep up with the Joneses to a certain extent, and so, but you have to be brutally honest about do I really care about that? Do I want to be a CEO or a CMO? I don't want to be a CMO. I never was interested in that. So, but it just seemed like financially that was the right move. And maybe if it had to come easier, I would have been okay, but it didn't feel like it was coming easy to do that. But that was my path. It seemed like leading marketing at these smaller companies. Eventually I maybe be a CMO. Right. Then I'm it's so hard, and ageism exists. And
yes, it does. Yes.
I really liked the storytelling aspect of what I do, and working with CEOs and working with startups. But if they're better funded, all the better. But that need more documentary style reporting and ways of connecting with their audiences better. I think that's where my strength lies, and then really just hoping to get a break and become a writer. So, I think it's like this ongoing journey, and the bad things that happen to you help define who you are by how you react to them, and what is left after the fallout of things that are tough.
Wow. Does that make sense? That makes perfect sense, Chauncey. Thank you again for sharing your candor and your story. I was going to ask you about that because you just ended that story with how you respond, how you react to challenges shapes who you are. And I know those are some very difficult personal health and professional challenges, personal challenges. You mentioned the divorce, some of the health challenges. During that moment, what was it that kept you motivated? Just curious. I'm just curious. Like,
sure, what I should. Well, again, like, first of all, I love being a mom. I had tried to be, was trying to become a mom for many years. Mm-hmm. So I also we had this, like, it never came out, but we started interviewing people in New York, older mothers, because I had this hypothesis that older mothers, it was a different experience than like a younger 20-something mom. Yes. And kind of that we might appreciate it a little bit more. Like there was never been a day where I've been like, oh, if only I didn't have these kids. Like never, not even a minute. Where I get why a younger woman might be like, oh my God, I can't do this or that because of my kids. Right. I never think that. That's just my personal relationship with my kids. I am like, every day is Christmas that I have these adorable, sweet children. And also I love, it's intellectually rewarding as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm falling off the track of, So my focus was being them. And like, also I'm intellectually driven. So I'm very curious about the world. So it's like trying to understand the world and make a story or make like sense making is kind of what I think my major activity is. Okay. So it's like that kept me focused. Yes. Also, I don't know, maybe I have like a lot of inner reserves of strength. I've been through a lot of stuff. I mean, and also who has time to be like, boo-hoo, I feel so bad for myself. Like we don't have time for that at all. Yeah,
we don't.
And I was just happy to be independent and feel like I could rely on myself, if that makes sense. I don't think you should always only rely on yourself, but this has been a period of like, oh wow, I can like put the bed together myself, or I can, which is kind of one thing I couldn't do. Actually, I have a bed that's so heavy because we got it in exchange for telling this story about a place called From the Source, and it's all this Indonesian hardwood. That's the one thing I actually can't put together. But like I can fix things in the house, I can like work a drill, and like just these little things have been like a source of personal amusement. And also, I don't know. I think it's like being able to have a family when I wasn't sure if I was going to have that. Yes, was a big deal for me. But also, my dad died, and that was.
Yeah, I think I remember you. Yeah, you shared that on the episode as well. That's why
I talk about my dad a lot in my.
Yeah, you had a lot. No, I remember that, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, just because you shared so many things that many of us, obviously, as we age, that's one of the factors of getting older, and especially as Gen Xers, you start to lose people, and sometimes it's unexpectedly. And I've went through a period in my mid to late 40s where I lost 5 family members within a 2 or 3 time period, and it was rough. But yeah, you shared about that. And so, and you just mentioned, like, you talk about your dad a lot, and I'm sure those memories and even those experiences is also kind of a light of inspiration for you, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yes. I feel like I became my dad in a weird, like more of my dad. So I'm trying to live out the things that I thought his personality gave promise to. And we were always very similar. So yeah, I just really loved my dad. I was very close with him. Yeah. And it was a horrific devastation when he died, but like, I feel like I could pass on something of him, and was very interesting. So I like to talk about him. So I have a lot of stories, so, and I grew up in Miami in the 80s, Ooh. Miami Vice era. Like they literally filmed Miami Vice in houses all over.
We can't, that's not even, we don't have a time. You have no idea how often, how much I'm serious. There's pictures of me with a white blazer t-shirt. I bought the white shoes, even though I look more like Tubbs, but dressed like Crockett. But no, I was a huge Miami Vice fan. You don't even know. I actually bought the DVD. So cool. I have the pilot episode in there. I know. Trust me.
My dad had a boat like that. Yeah, kind of was like not. I mean, he was not a drug dealer, and I did read. Oh God, the people who did the documentary Cocaine Cowboys wrote a book, and it's about the Mutiny Hotel.
Yes, it's called
Hotel Scarface, and my dad lived in that hotel when he first left my mom.
No way.
So, yeah.
Oh, we can have an entire conversation.
Oh, I know.
I'm telling you.
You should read this book. It's very entertaining.
See, I can nerd out on it. Chauncey, I can talk to you for hours. First of all, again, thank you so much for sharing the story, because I really wanted to get into the behind the scenes of just the experiences that you shared on that episode. I can definitely tell you are a storyteller. You're very candid. And again, anyone that's going through some of the things that you have gone through and currently are going through, to me, needs to hear those stories, because like you said earlier, there are not a lot of us that are focusing on the challenges or the trials that many of us go through. We just see the highlights
I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
So when you talk to people, I mean, what is your sense of if you were going to take the temperature on the culture right now, if for people in our age group around you, okay. What do you think? Do you think people feel hopeful? Do you think people are reinventing themselves? Do you think people are scared about money? What?
Check. All of the above. I would say it skews more toward, and I've seen it all. I think it is skewing. There's definitely some panic. I think part of the aging process, especially for people in our generation, because of the financial situation, many of us are dealing with, and me personally, yours truly, with aging parents, taking care of kids. I'm an only child, so all the weight falls on me, but I have 2 kids, I have a wife, entrepreneur. So a lot of us, and I wrote an article about this for my Mid-Career Mastery newsletter for LinkedIn called Sandwich in the Middle, about the sandwich generation. And it was during Mental Health Awareness Month. And I had a series called...
We're the sandwich generation, are we?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Well, every generation changes. So they call it sandwich when you're between aging parents and you're rearing young children, but we have been sandwiched in multiple ways. So now we're at the age range where many of us have aging parents, if they're still around, and we're also raising kids, whether they're young Gen Alphas or they're Gen Z teenagers, what have you. But also we've been sandwiched between 2 big behemoth generations as well. So we get lost in the middle. We're sandwiched.
One woman that I interviewed in my last podcast episode, she's a chief strategy officer for the Harris Poll. And she said, I asked her about this because I'm like, why? I feel like we don't exist, even though we're still there's a lot of Gen X celebrities. She said, well, Gen X seems to tend to go towards either they're more leaning millennial and some lean more boomer. And I thought that made a little sense. And maybe I lean a little millennial.
Well, that's the quintessential, that's the makeup of Gen X, because the reason we're the smaller generation of the generation. I'm a generational nerd. So we're at 65 million or so. Millennials are 77 million. Millennials around 80 million. And so we've always been the smaller generation. That's why they called us Gen X, or baby bust generation, because when we were born during those years between 1965 through 1980, the divorce rates were high. People didn't have children as much. And so we're smaller, but still 65 million, we still pack a powerful punch. But because we're smaller, because our generation, the divorce rates of our parents were high. I mean, I'm a product. My parents got divorced when I was 7. So I was
6.
And I was a latchkey kid. Like I put in a post on LinkedIn where there's a picture of me. I posted it.
I saw it.
I literally have the shoestring around my neck for the school picture that at the end was the key to let myself in. And I didn't take it off of the school picture.
I had a friend that had that.
Yeah, I did. So I was a latchkey kid. So many of us, we became self-reliant. We knew how to entertain ourselves. I come in after school.
Well, my parents were narcissists, so that's how I.
Well, a lot of boomers. That's what a lot of boomers were that way. I mean, we could have a whole conversation because the boomers, the nickname for the boomer generation was the me generation.
Yeah.
That alone says it all. And so, but you can't blame them, but that's how they were. That's why we overcompensate.
Because they were compensating for the 50s.
Exactly. And we overcompensate for being neglected. So we're the helicopter parents. And so it's all a cycle. But yeah, going back to your question, a lot of us, we have these challenges. I mean, I was just having a conversation where people are struggling, whether they were entrepreneurs or people who, I spent 25 years in corporate. So I know that world, but it's getting hard to find work. The money is getting tight.
Hard. I don't know what people are doing. That's what I don't understand. I'm like, everything I have to
it's becoming more, you have to have a portfolio career. I mean, and again, it's hard to shape your mindset around that for people that don't know that world. And again, if you would have asked me 15 years ago, would I be doing what I'm doing now? I would have been like, yeah, all right. I mean, I did and I liked being in corporate. I did the MBA thing, but this is more me. And I know how I am. I like to create my own pathway. I am the master of my own destiny. Now, if I had to, I know I can and I could. But but
it's still hard. I want to be we should talk offline because I look at like your tips, because you'd think that it would all add up to everything going pretty smoothly for me because I am very entrepreneurial. But it has been
entrepreneurial and smoothly don't belong in the same sentence.
I'm resilient. I'm not like, oh no, I don't have my 401k. I'm used to it being like this. But I still find it to be difficult, and I'm kind of trying to figure out like where the economy is going to go for people in our generation. Like, what's going to happen, and how do we solve the problem? I'm always trying to like control my environment and solve the problem. And
we can have an entire conversation about that, and that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about is how do we influence policy? How do we influence the macro decision making that are for people in our generation that tend to be lost in these economic conversations.
Yeah.
Chauncey, this has been great. But before I let you go, there's always a question I ask all of my guests after we talk about the professional journey, is to get more into your personality. And as a music aficionado, junkie, I always like to hear this question. So Chauncey, if there was a song that would play anytime you walk down the street or into a room that perfectly reflects and captures the essence and the brand of Chauncey Zalkin.
Oh my God.
What song would that be? What would be your own personal theme song?
Capture the brand. Because what I was going to answer is that I was on another podcast and this is just what I'm going to tell. I told them I couldn't think of anything. So I thought, to be kind of funny, I thought to be very honest, it's a horrible song. The song is The Final Countdown. It's a horrible song. It's not my favorite song. I don't think, but somehow that song does come into my head a lot. The Final Countdown.
Who is it by?
Like White Lion or something. It's horrible. So I was in this podcast. This is the one in person, and they started playing it as I ended the. Is that what you're gonna do?
No, I'm not gonna play it. You mean is it like
we have Chauncey?
It's like an older. Is it an older song? Is it an 80s?
Oh
song?
My God, yes.
Like by Europe? Is that the name? Is that the group?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not my favorite. I just wanted to tell you that story about how
I love the story.
To be kind of funny, and all of a sudden it was like playing loud in my ears.
I love the story. So would that be considered your personal theme song right now? If you were just entering a room, if you were walking on stage and they were introducing, all right, for the latest New York Times best-selling author of Claw, please welcome Chauncey Zalkin, and the song will be playing as you walk across the stage with your book in hand. And Oprah has featured it in the book of the month.
Oh, you know what?
What song?
I think that's too big a question, and I really should have dedicated an hour of meditation to that because I love it. But it's too much pressure. I don't have the answer. I feel like I take these things and I would take literally a week and be like, I need to make a chart. But I did have like a whole music video play out in my head to this song. It's called Clean Slate.
Clean Slate
by M. Ward.
Clean Slate by M. Ward.
Yes.
I love it. Tell me why.
And I had this idea that like a fist fight breaks out in the carpool lane by all these moms and parents who are so buttoned up and so like trying to do their best, and they just kind of like let loose, and they like a kind of comical fist fight, not a scary, like, and all the kids are just watching as the moms like pull each other's hair and like dads too, or just everyone in the couple to this song by M. Ward. So you got to check the song out. And the first one is like any Wu-Tang song. I love Wu-Tang. I love The Cure. These are like my two favorite. And I used to love Prince so much, but I really say like enduring would be Wu-Tang Clan and The Cure are my two favorite bands. Or I have a million bands.
See, I love you. You are such a Gen Xer. Queen. Cash rules everything around me.
I was like, I like Sabrina Carpenter. I like a lot of new artists that especially female artists that I think are really great. Chapel Roan, I really like. But yes, that M Word song. That's my final answer. I hope you edit this in a way that doesn't make it sound like.
No, I have
just don't edit it. Just keep this all in.
Clean Slate final by M Word.
Or M Word's Clean Slate, which is really great because it's very relevant here.
See, I like that. Oh yeah, I think it's very. I mean, like both.
You're always looking for your clean slate.
I love that Clean Slate. That definitely I would feel what captures you and where you are. Speaking of Clean Slate,
will you do me a favor and listen to it?
No, you have to ask me. Whenever I do these, I don't just listen. I put these in a playlist. every.
Good. This is it. I feel good about my answer. M Word.
You always should feel good about your answer. Always, because it's your.
I didn't know. Should I be funny? Should I like?
No. You're overthinking it. You're overthinking it. You're overthinking it. Whatever song comes to mind is the song that you were supposed to say, or songs. So I love it. No, and I'm actually going to listen to it.
I actually wrote a whole playlist soundtrack for my first book, which is called Rock Underwater, and there's a whole every scene has a song.
I love this.
It should get published. It's a very good book. I'm
sure it is. It's going to be. Chauncey, this has been great. Please,
thank you.
I can talk to you for hours.
On my podcast.
I definitely will. Please let everyone know that's listening how they can keep in touch with you, how they can listen to the podcast, how they can continue to just embrace themselves in your writings, your stories. Please let everyone know how they can follow.
Oh, yes. Please subscribe to Actual People wherever you get your podcasts. It will be your best friend. I promise to be your best friend through my podcast. And also find me on Substack. I think it's substack.chaunceyzalkin.com. Mm-hmm. And, there's a chaunceyzalkin.com website where you can find all of those links and more. Yeah.
Love it. Everyone, I tell you, if you've been listening, because if you're listening now, you've been listening, but you've heard an amazing conversation. You've witnessed the behind the scenes, the stories, the insights, the passion, the self-awareness, the self-actualization of a Gen Xer. I consider to be someone who is a gem. Please make sure you follow Chauncey, get to her Substack, listen to Actual People, some amazing episodes. Chauncey, thanks so much for spending time with me and our Gen X Amplified audience.
Thank you so much. This has been great. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Take care.
Okay.
Okay, so that was probably one of the most engaging, exciting, insightful conversations I've had on Gen X Amplified. I am so glad and honored that I had the chance to chat with Chauncey Zalkin. Chauncey, thank you so much for bringing your energy, bringing the humor, but more importantly, bringing just your passion and your insights to Gen X Amplified and to the conversation. And I appreciate you. I applaud you. I am encouraged and inspired by your candor and your authenticity and just your unfiltered essence and your energy. Thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing all the things that you have gone through, all the highs and the lows, the opportunities and the possibilities, right? You gotta get that book out. You are going to write that book in your novels, I assure you. But thank you once again. I really enjoyed our conversation. And for everyone, please check out her podcast, Actual People, and her Substack. She is such a phenomenal and amazing storyteller. In her perspectives, I've read them, I've listened to them, both the podcast and the Substack, and I tell you, you will be inspired. And as she mentioned in the episode, if you follow her and especially subscribe and listen to her podcast, it will become your best friend. I like the way that she phrased that. So definitely check out Chauncey and all that she's doing and all of her greatness. And if you have enjoyed this episode, as always, like to say, please give us a great rating and review wherever you enjoy this podcast. And go to adrianporter.com or genxamplified.com, actually, so you can check out the show notes and check out all the other episodes that we have to offer you as part of this mid-career mastery movement. Once again, thank you so much for listening and for subscribing to Gen X Amplified. I truly appreciate it. And as always, keep shining, keep thriving, and keep winning. Take care.